Marvel Snaps patch last week. We got our first insights from data miners as to what Marvel Snaps June season could have in store, an Eternals themed set of card releases. Today, we're going to take a look at the early data mines for what's going to be coming in that month. There are really some sweet and out there designs, as well as some things that are truly powerful. Let's go ahead and dive on into our first peek at the potential details for what the June season will bring. Our first June card release data mine to be the season pass card for the month is Gilgamesh, a base 5/2 with the on reveal effect. This gets +2 power for each of your other cards in play with increased power. The immediate question that comes to mind with a card like Gilgamesh that is purely a stat stick is, can he be big enough, consistently enough to be worthwhile to put in your deck and build your deck around? If we use other 5 energy cards that just provide numbers as a baseline, I think Gamora is a good one to look at. She regularly provides 12 points of power for 5 energy, so if we expect Gilgamesh to get at least Gamora's rate, we would need 5 cards in play that have their power increase to get up to 12, and ideally more than that so we can get bigger than something like Gamora that only sees fringe play. At base level, the best enabler for Gilgamesh is almost certainly Blue Marvel. You play Blue Marvel out on turn 5, it powers up all your other non-Blue Marvel cards, and then Gilgamesh gets to count up basically everything you have in play for purposes of getting his bonus. Gilgamesh also notably only costs 5 energy, so you can play him in tandem with a 1 energy card such as Squirrel Girl, for example, to let him get even larger if you have an ongoing bonus such as Blue Marvel on the board. Well, we'll definitely have to experiment a little bit to find the best shell that Gilgamesh's effect potentially works, and I think ongoing effects like Blue Marvel, Patriot, and even Khazar are likely the most reasonable places to start when trying to figure this card out. Before we move on, I'd like to take a quick minute to say about the sponsor of today's video, Flexispot. Flexispot not only makes the standing desk that I absolutely love and swear by, they make the exercise bike that you'll often see me sweating in while we sweat playing Conquest in Marvel Snap, but they also make the OC6 office chair that I'm currently sitting in right now that's rated to hold up to 500 pounds. It's wonderful for leaning back in and has all sorts of adjustments up, down, all around to get to armrest and everything else situated just right, in addition to having phenomenal lumbar support. If you'd like to support my content while also getting some premium office supplies for yourself, be sure to check out my link in the video description down below for everything Flexispot has to offer. If you're someone that spends a lot of time in your home office, like myself, having ergonomic additions like these really pays dividends for itself over time with how much more comfortable your body will be. With that being said, let's get back to our card review, shall we? Our next June card release, tentatively releasing on the 4th, is Thena, a base 2/1 with the triggered ability after each turn gets +3 power if you played exactly 2 cards. At face value, I would estimate Thena is probably a very reasonable and likely powerful 2 energy addition to Marvel Snap. Her ceiling is that you can trigger her ability on turns 3, 4, 5, and 6, ultimately ending her up with as much as 13 points of power without any outside help or things like Limbo extending the game to 7th turn. I think something that's interesting to note about her templating is that while you can play her on turn 2, she can also be a part of the 2 cards that you play out in a turn, meaning if you deploy Thena on turn 3 alongside a 1 energy play, you played exactly 2 cards and she should trigger that turn. While obviously the theoretical ceiling of 13 points of power is not always going to be achievable, I think it's worth calling out that if you activate her effect only twice, she ends up being a 2/7, which is still solidly above rate. Thena is definitely a card that I personally am probably going to play with a lot. I absolutely love these cheaper cards that scale in power by meeting certain conditions. You can build your deck around them in interesting ways, and this effect does exactly that. I think she's also likely a card that enjoys seeing play alongside Kitty Pryde, who's one of my favorite cards to build around, since she'll give you a consistent way to play something out cheap alongside a second card to make sure Thena grows every single turn. Our next June card release, tentatively set to drop on the 11th, is Sersi, a 5/7 with the on reveal effect. Transform your other cards here into random cards that cost 1 more. I don't expect this type of effect to be truly competitive ever. I think the output range that you get from her effect at any given cost that you're upgrading is just too wide and unpredictable to be consistently useful. That being said, it's definitely a neat card, and it's one that I expect my viewers to give me lots of decks with on viewer deck submission days, because it'll be funny and it'll create esports style moments where someone, often the person playing it, gets completely blown out, I would wager. But this is definitely more of a casual, fun build around than something that's likely to be truly competitive, in my opinion. The next June card release slated to drop on the 18th is Makkari, a 3/3 with the ability, after the turn, runs from your hand to a random location if possible. So this is essentially a free 3-power card to somewhere on the board anytime you draw her. That means, in 75% of your Marvel stat games, you're going to get 3 points of power for free. The immediate thing that jumps to mind for this card is the fact that she is a strong guy enabler. That's a card that recently got a buff and rewards you for getting cards out of your hand. The type of deck list that would want this is one that's looking for a few more points of power on the board, but is also regularly able to use up all its energy, so it's going to benefit from getting those stats for free. It's kind of hard to estimate if this type of effect is going to be good, bad, or otherwise, but it's definitely a very novel design, and I'm interested to see how it plays out in Marvel Snap's space. Our next Eternal slated to release on June 25th is Phastos, a 3/3 with the on reveal effect. Give each card in your deck -1 cost or +2 power. This is an interesting effect. The most similar thing we have in Marvel Snap currently is Okoye, who's a 2/2 that gives your entire deck +1 power, who really doesn't see a ton of play. That being said, this is twice that amount of power or a cost reduction, which is certainly more impactful on average than a couple of points of stats. I think the biggest thing this type of card has going for it is the cube equity that its effect can provide. The fact that your opponent doesn't know if your cards have +2 power or -1 cost makes it difficult for them to play around your output range on really key turns of the game. I think that makes an effect like this especially powerful in a format like Conquest, where that unpredictability, even once your opponent knows the entirety of your deck list, can be the difference between winning or losing key cubes and ultimately the match. Our final card in today's review might be the spiciest / most interesting Marvel Snap card to ever release to date, Arishem. It is our first 7 energy card being introduced to the game, having just 7 points of power, but it has this really wild start of the game effect: gain +1 max energy, and then shuffle 12 random cards into your deck. So I would assume, similar to Thanos' Infinity Stones, these 12 cards don't technically count as starting in your deck, which means any deck with Arishem in it probably starts with Quinjet as well automatically, so you can make those 12 extra cards cheaper. This effect is sweet, similar to Phastos that we talked about a second ago. One of the key strengths to this, past obviously having more energy than your opponent every turn, is just your output range is going to be unpredictable. While there's certainly going to be games where you don't get anything useful and he just gums up your deck, there's also going to be games where, he generates you the perfect tech card, or lets you play out on curve in a way that's potent, or catches your opponent with an Alioth that they're not expecting out of your deck because they know you're not playing it. It's really hard to know if this effect is going to be competitive or not. I think I would lean on the side of expecting this to be more reasonable than not. Having both +1 maximum energy is a big gain, and the output range being unpredictable is quite strong in a game like Marvel Snap. The big question mark with this card is, what are the other 10 cards in your deck going to be optimal to look like past the inclusion of Quinjet to make your 12 extra cards cheaper? All in all, the June season of releases at the early glance look like they have a lot to look forward to. Personally, Thena is the card that appeals to me the most, but I'd be lying if I wasn't telling you that Arishem is a card that I'm absolutely going to love trying to figure out with its effect and trying to mitigate the variance that it brings to the game while also leveraging the power that it provides with that extra energy. I'd love to know in the comments down below which cards from the June season you would most like to get your hands on and build some decks with and play some games. And as always, if you enjoyed my breakdown here today, be sure to snap that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel to come back for more in the future.